Revit has a special tool underneath the Collaborate tab on the ribbon called Copy Monitor. Now, Copy Monitor's function is to copy in a Revit family from a linked Revit file, then monitor that Revit family back in the original Revit file so that if any changes should take place back in the original Revit file, you'll get a notification inside of your model that a change has taken place. To use the Copy Monitor tool, you can select on Copy Monitor from underneath the Collaborate tab, then click Select Link. Highlight over the linked file that you want to copy a Revit family from. Then click on that Revit model. Move your cursor over here to Options and then select on Options. Here inside of the Copy Monitor options, we can see a variety of different tabs. And from here, we can adjust the settings associated with our levels, grids, columns, walls, and floors. If we select on grids, we'll see that we have, back in our original architectural model, four different kinds of Revit families that represent structural grids. For new type, these are all the different Revit families inside of our Revit model that we could use to represent the original structural grids. For example, back in the original Revit model, there's a 1/4 inch bubble structural grid family. Well, we have a 1/4 inch bubble structural grid family inside of our Revit model as well. But if we click where it has the 1/4 inch bubble and then click again, we'll get a little down arrow. Select there, we'll see that we have 1/4 inch bubble, custom gap, and then bubble gap available to us. What we actually don't have is the bubble with gap option available to us. Because of this, what would end up occurring is that if we do a copy monitor of the structural grids, right now we would be copy monitoring each one of these different kinds of structural grids, and it would make a copy inside of our model with this Revit family. And we could match those up. So if we wanted to have custom gap have its own, we can come over here and make that be custom gap. Bubble gap, if we copied that into our Revit project, we could select the bubble gap. Now, unfortunately, we don't have one for the bubble with gap. You would have to choose which Revit family do we want to represent inside of our project, the bubble with gap. In this case, I'll just change this to also be the 1/4 inch bubble gap, the original type and the new type as would be represented inside of our project. Let's click on OK. Next thing we need to do is select on Copy. And what this is going to allow us to do is anything that we select on will then get copied into our Revit model. Now, the original will still be there. We'll just have a new copy of it in the exact same spot within our model. But before we select on individual objects, what I'd like to do is put a check mark next to multiple. This will allow us to select on multiple Revit objects to copy them all at once. What I'd like to do now is create a copy of each and every one of these structural grids going straight on up the Revit model, at least up to this point. So to do that, make sure the check mark's next to multiple, zoom in a little bit, then click and right about this location. Hold your mouse button down, and then window around each one of those structural grids. Once they've all been highlighted, you can let go of your mouse button and then select on Finish. This will officially copy them in. In fact, we can see that they're all getting monitored by this little icon right here. Now, what monitoring means is that each one of these grids are now being monitored. Should they get updated inside of the original architectural model, we'll get a notification message inside of our model saying that these structural grids may need to adjust because a change has happened back in the original architectural model. To see that occur, let's come up here and then just select on Finish. If for some reason you're not getting the finish, just make sure that Copy Monitor has been selected up here and then click on Finish. Now what I'd like to do is open up the architectural model, make a slight adjustment to one of these structural grids, and see what happens inside of our own model. To do that, we'll come up to the big R, we'll go to Open, we'll open up a project, we'll open up the architectural link model from underneath Chapter 5, click on Open. We'll get a message saying that it's going to have to unlink this file inside of our document. That's okay. We'll just say yes. Yes, we want to continue. And now the next thing I'd like to do is come down here to D, and I just want to move D just a little bit. So we'll select on D, come up here to move, click a base point, and then move it 1 inch. A 1 inch movement typically for us wouldn't be enough to be able to see it or maybe notice it immediately inside of our plans. So, this is a great example of where the copy monitor can be useful to us if we're copy monitoring an object back in the original file. After doing that change, click on Save and then close your architectural model down. Now we need to link back in that Revit model by coming up here to the Manage tab and selecting on Manage Links. Click on the architectural linked model, and now we want to reload it into our project. And the message that you'll get is instance of link needs coordination review. What it's trying to tell you is that a change has occurred, and now we need to use the coordination review tools to see which change has occurred inside of our model. So we'll click on OK, we'll click on OK again. And now the next thing we need to do is that coordination review. So come up here to the Collaborate tab, select on Coordination Review, and then click on Select Link. What we'll do now is click on that linked file, and now it's going to tell us everything that has changed inside of that original architectural file. And we can see that in this case, the grid has moved. And we can even see which grid that it is. In this case, it's grid D and the element ID for that grid. We have options here for what action do we want to have take place now. Do we want to reject the fact that that has moved? Do we want to accept the difference, which means not actually move our structural grid, but just accept the fact that, yes, the architectural has changed, but we don't want to make a change to ours? Or do we want to modify our grid? In fact, in this case, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to modify our grid D so that it moves into the same spot as where the new location is for that architectural grid. Let's click on OK. And even though, because we were zoomed out, we couldn't see the slight movement, our grid has in fact moved up to match the architectural grid, which we are now copy monitoring. Copy monitoring allows us to make copies of those original Revit families into our Revit project. Then it monitors whether or not those Revit families have changed back in the original file. If they have changed, then you have the option inside of your own model to either accept the changes, which will adjust all the things you've copied and monitored, or you can accept the differences, which means it's okay if that change has taken place back in that original model, but you want to leave your information in the exact same place as it currently is.